I'm employed by the Southwest Lifelong Learning Network, and the area I cover is the crossover between heritage and tourism. I'm particularly involved with looking at the training for people who are currently in employment within the heritage or tourism sectors. There's a lot of crossover in terms of that, and I'm involved particularly in the Southwest. My personal research has stretched from working in New Mexico or Arizona, New Mexico and Arizona, sorry, and also, I didn't mention this before, in Hawaii. So, though those areas are quite different from Southwest England physically, in terms of the issues of them being on the periphery of the nations that they form a part of, and some of the issues of training and economics of the areas, there's a lot of similarity.
And what did you do in these areas?
I was particularly looking at my previous research. I've been looking at the interaction between craft workers and their heritage sites. Also in Hawaii, particularly looking at performance activities in relation to cultural identity. In the Southwest, I'm looking at two particular areas: heritage construction skills. So that's actually the maintenance, care of heritage buildings, and the techniques and skills that are needed for that. So that's sort of indirect relationship to tourism in terms of looking at the tourism, heritage as a resource for tourism. The other area I look at is interpretation. I'm presenting at the conference to do with enactment and the issues surrounding training and the provision of enactment at sites across the region, and also some from America as well, which I've also recently done some field work across the east coast of America looking at different sites there, and the same research question in terms of what makes a good enactor from a site's point of view and from a visitor's point of view, and the internal motivations of enactors, which can be quite different from the expectations of the site managers or the economic need, basically, of the tourism industry, to use that term again.
And could you tell a bit about enactment? What is it about? What do people do there?
Well, in terms of, I think one of the main problems that I had in terms of looking at enactment was, as an area, it's very poorly defined. People have a perception, usually in the UK, there are a few groups, particularly the Roman enactors groups and the sealed knot civil war societies, and you also have some interaction with Second World War enactors, that they have a particular way of approaching it, which is very internally driven, but they form most of the perceptions around the way people look at enactment. But the same qualities are actually held by the presentations that a lot of people give, that they don't consider themselves enactors, but looking at it from a training point of view or looking at it from a site manager's point of view, the same things are occurring. So I've taken a very broad view of what enactment is. Possibly some of the people I call enactors would call themselves enactors, but the overall definition is anybody who is acting in some way as if they are living or acting in the past, or engaging with a historical process, primarily for some reason in terms of demonstrating or explaining or educating the audience that will be coming to the event. So it's rather a broad-ranging and possibly a contentious issue, but it is very interesting in terms of across the southwest of England. It's actually quite an important part of the way a lot of sites market themselves. So in terms of it being an economic driver and also a way of people gaining employment from working within the tourism industry, it's quite an odd area, and it has a lot of potential, but it also has a lot of risk for actually affecting the audience's perception of what a site is like, or their perception of the visit to a site, and it's quite hard to control. A lot more than the conventional supply side or audience-led tourism models tend to. Sorry, I'll have to go back to that one. Sorry. one of the interesting aspects of this is that the supply side models, or even the demand led models, don't tend to cover enactment fully, because it's actually, as an activity, it seems to operate across both areas. So it's very hard to define in terms of current models from a theoretical basis in terms of tourism. But it's actually a crucial area economically in terms of supporting a destination's identity, supporting the way they are marketed, and also the distinctiveness of identities quite often builds on this. In terms of sites which may be quite difficult to decipher initially, this is used quite often as a way of educating people about the sites, but it comes with a number of risks, and those risks I'll be identifying in the paper, actually.
And so, what is it that fascinates you about your research, or what drives you in there?
That's an enormous question. I think the way people, part of it is identity construction. This goes back to an anthropology aspect, that it's very much an expression, and quite extreme expressions of the way people identify as individuals, as they identify in terms of communities, and also the economic aspects. The way people actually construct a niche within the tourism industry, particularly in very small numbers of people doing very unusual things, is quite a fascinating area. Well, for me anyway. So that's really, I guess, what drives me. Having had the experience of looking at cultures, what I suppose would be called exotic cultures in the UK, it's quite fascinating finding that you see the same things occurring in localities across the UK as well. It's that basis of practice being exhibited, exhibiting theoretical concepts, really, which I find a very interesting area.
Thank you very much.